Hey, how's everybody doing on this New Year's Day here? Welcome back to the Fallacious Truth. I was taking a look through TikTok again and I came across this fellow called Turtleneck Emo. And he's got a few ideals that even I couldn't make sense of. They were so out there. If you're going to make an attempt to support modern womanism, at least make an attempt to make sense. Then make an attempt to actually defend a point that isn't made up. It's a fallacious ideal that has nothing to do with anything in reality. In this first clip, he states this. Now, aside from the ridiculous notion that women are somehow oppressed in today's society, no man with any ounce of sense is going to see themselves as a womanist and thus couldn't see themselves as any less of a man. The indoctrination of the modern progressive man in today's society is truly terrifying, especially when considering the advancement of us as a species. Let's make an attempt here to break this down as to what this guy's actually saying. He eventually goes on to say, you're admitting your version of masculinity requires the oppression of women. First, I'd love for someone to educate me just how women are oppressed in today's society here in America. Any takers? Leave a note down for me in the comments as to just how women are oppressed. First off, there aren't different versions of masculinity. That's simply modern culture trying to compartmentalize different men into different categories for the furtherment of the division of our society today. If you can convince the drone masses that there is a part of a man that is undesirable, which in today's society is pretty much anything that makes a man, you can convince a certain type of man, commonly referred to as a beta male, that his masculine traits make him undesirable. Those of us who know better know that it's because of our masculine traits that we are desirable, and quite frankly, without said traits, our development and advancement as a species would have arguably never happened. There is no version of masculinity that requires the oppression of women. In fact, I would argue that there's no masculinity that oppresses women. When left to our own vices, the most egalitarian of societies unequivocally prove that men and women organically choose what they would prefer doing. Men overwhelmingly choose paths that lead them down into more masculine roles, such as leadership, protective roles, etc. Women naturally choose roles that are more feminine, such as the humanities, taking care of one another and nurturing children. Forcing the existing genders to do the opposite of their design nature is creating masculine women and feminized men, as we can clearly see here. He is perpetuating a belief that is not only contrary to normalcy, but contrary to how men and women were designed. So no, being a womanist doesn't make you any less of a man. It makes you someone who has been indoctrinated by the latest New Age nonsense in progressive institutions into making you think that what makes a man is somehow distasteful. And this has ultimately been proven false when you look at the most egalitarian of societies. Again, there is no version of masculinity that requires any oppression of women, as there is no woman in today's modern society here in the United States that is oppressed. Not one of you can name a single legal right that is afforded to men that isn't afforded to women. I can, however, name many legal rights and privileges that are afforded to women that are afforded to men, but that's a video for another time entirely. Now, this next one is a bit different, as throughout the whole thing, you're actually trying to decide if she is to be taken seriously or not. Now, if she is to be taken seriously, and she is making an actual attempt to bring to light points that somehow this world is made for men and not women, then this is among the most ridiculous things I've ever had the displeasure of hearing. She is trying so desperately to grasp at straws that she's making herself look like a dumbass. And quite honestly, that's what womanism makes everybody look like.
Y'all are loving this series. Let's talk about the ways that the world is just physically built for cis men. This is part 2 from before my page blew up. Starting off simple, women tend to be shorter than men and often can't reach the shelves in their own homes.
She first starts this diatribe off by saying women tend to be shorter than men and often can't reach the shelves in their own homes. Well, you know what? I think you caught us there. It's our plot to make it more difficult for women to reach things in the kitchen. Oh my goodness. Am I even allowed to say the kitchen, as it points to my evil masculinity in assuming that a woman should ever be in the kitchen? Perhaps reaching for something in the bathroom or in the living room that might be too high up. Or actually, are you ultimately saying that women don't have the intellectual capacity or wherewithal just to go get a step stool or simply to get a chair to stand on and retrieve said object? Or are you so entitled to think that everything should be at the behest of your own convenience?
Office spaces are usually kept about 5 degrees too cold for women because of biological differences in metabolism.
Next, she goes on to complain that it's kept 5 degrees too cold in office buildings for women. Never mind that there are more men that work in office buildings than women. And the logic would simply dictate to put the temperature at a happy medium. Now, if you think about this intelligently, in an office environment, you can put more layers of clothing on to keep yourself warm. You can't really take off the layers of clothing. So suck it up, buttercup. If you don't like the temperature, find a different job. That job doesn't need to and can't cater to your every whim at every part of the day. Again, the entitlement of you women is astounding. If a man is too warm or too cold, he simply dresses accordingly. As we know, it's unreasonable to expect comfort at all times.
When car companies crash test their vehicles, they usually use dummies that are male-sized. So then when crashes actually happen, women are 50% more likely to be seriously injured.
Now, with regards to crash test dummies, I'm not really going to rehash this again. I'll simply leave a link to another video where I did address this in pretty good detail. And spoiler alert, it doesn't have anything to do with the patriarchy or the world being catered towards men or being built for men, etc., etc.
Speech recognition software like OK Google is 70% more likely to recognize male voices. And in a similar vein, when Siri was released, she could find prostitutes and Viagra suppliers, but not abortion providers. She could also help you if you said you had a heart attack, but not if you'd been raped.
Are you really bitching about male voices being better recognized over female voices? And what can and can't be found using said platforms? While this dives a bit too much into politics for my liking on this particular video, I'd be happy to cover it with my thoughts on a future video. This once again clearly shows that you're grasping at straws. You're trying to find anything that you can to prove a point that can't ultimately be proven. You're bitching about software that's still ultimately in its infancy. If you truly have a problem with how the speech is recognized, I'm sure you could go off and learn programming and artificial intelligence all by yourself. And then ultimately you can make a platform that recognizes everything to your liking. How exactly is Siri going to help you if you've been raped? It makes far more sense that you could have a pre-programmed response for a medical condition rather than a violent act. Use logic and common sense here. Don't show your ineptitude and stupidity if you don't have to.
NASA had to cancel the first all-female spacewalk because they didn't have enough small-sized spacesuits.
And now we're on to NASA. Are you really complaining about NASA because they had to cancel something for not having the correct size spacesuits? And because they didn't have these smaller size suits tailored to women, this somehow shows that NASA is tailored for men and men alone? No, this is simply a byproduct of the industry, as there were more men that needed suits than women. Also, the first people who used these suits were men, and since it takes tens of millions of dollars to create these new suits haven't been made. This has nothing to do with a patriarchal world. It simply has to do with the non-existent need for smaller suits at the time and NASA not wanting to sink tens of millions of more into suits that will only be used a handful of times. I will say that the private industry is actually getting involved in this now and creating a suit that is not only in orders of magnitude cheaper, but it will also be more universal.
And fitness monitors like Fitbits underestimate steps when doing housework or pushing strollers. This obviously affects everyone, but disproportionately women.
Now she's complaining about fitness monitors. And since we all know that underestimating the steps done by housework is a plot to make all women walk more, and thus make them skinnier, we must obviously put a stop to this. The unfairness of it all that an imperfect device wouldn't be able to take into account each and every factor for said device's accuracy. I also suspect that this is simply because women are by and large shorter than men, and thus the stride differences aren't taken into account properly. Never mind that this is most likely a programming, manufacturing, or design error. No, it's actually the direct result of the patriarchy, and women need to rise up and learn how to program now. Learn how to manufacture, learn how to design, and learn how to market products and make them precisely to the specifications that they want them, so they are simply better suited to women.
I don't know about y'all, but I cannot fit my hand around most phones. And there are not enough stalls in women's restrooms, so we have lines like,
just when you think you might be done with the stupidity here, you realize you're not. Now it's your phones. So I guess if you can't get your hands around your phone, design, market, and implement one that is tailored to your hand. If there aren't enough stalls in the bathroom, wait in line for one to open up. These are you problems. They aren't man problems, and they aren't the problems of said store, said building, or the facility that you're in. There are some pretty basic steps you can take prior to leaving to go into a store that will mitigate your need to use the facilities there. And if your hand is too damn small to fit around a phone, then you design something to make it easier for you to fit your hand around. Why are you bitching on TikTok and waiting for us men to solve your problems? Oh, that's right. We've only been solving your problems and making your life more convenient since the beginning of time. And your only appreciation is to show your insatiable entitlement and complain some more. For being a strong and independent woman, you rely on men to fix your problems an awful lot. The one constant that I'm noticing here is that women can and will find anything and everything to complain about if it isn't tailored to their liking. But they aren't willing to make any changes about it. They're simply content to complain about it and wait for a man to cater to their every whim, as that is how society teaches women. Modern womanism has created a generation of women that are so entitled that they actually have the audacity to complain about a constant that has benefited society for generations, and then expect things to be changed for a small minority, instead of finding the workaround that has been used for said generation, such as wearing an extra layer of clothing, or stepping on a step stool or a chair to increase the height for your individual need. Or heaven forbid there aren't enough stalls in the bathroom for you, because we all know not enough stalls in the bathroom is a plot against women somehow. Instead of taking 3 hours in said bathroom, how about you simply go in there, do your business, and come out? Instead of spending 23 out of 24 hours on social media searching for validation while you're on the toilet, how about putting your phone down and lessen the time that you're in the bathroom? I know these ideals are on the logical side of things, so it might be a tad bit difficult for you to understand, but with patience and actually thinking things through, you might come to a point where you can see the validity in what is being said here. Now, onto our classes of crazy and ignorance. The first guy here, we're going to label him as a class 3 crazy and a class 6 ignorance. There really isn't much to be said other than the man has been brainwashed into thinking that masculinity is needed less in today's society, when I would argue that it's needed more. And as far as this lady goes, I think our crazy level should be 6 and the ignorance should also be 6. Aside from the ridiculousness of the things that she chose to point out in a failed attempt to make a point, she seems to think that everything that isn't done to her liking is either A, a plot against her, or B, a plot against women as a whole. If she doesn't like something, she needs to change it instead of bitching about it and waiting for a man to solve her problems. And that's all for today, folks. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this, and share it out to your friends and family, as I'm hoping to grow this channel in the future. Thank you, take care, and have a good one.